I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where we cover some of the most scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up here in Northwest Florida and beyond. And we got one of those beyond cases that we're talking about today. Joining me as always, of course, is Pam Hill, pharmacist and victims advocate. She's experienced violent crime in her own family, which has been a tragedy, but certainly beneficial to a lot of the victims that we try to advocate for on the show and cover a lot of these cases. And this episode is called Boyfriend Shot Girlfriend's Jealous Ex-Boyfriend. Don't FAFO with Brian Camp. What are we talking about? This is an interesting case. This is the case of a young man who was recently tried for killing another young man who essentially broke into their apartment when he was in bed with his girlfriend, his baby mama. And this guy that broke in had also dated the baby mama briefly when the baby daddy and the baby mama had been apart. So anyway, that's the basic premise of this case. But we got a few things we want to update before we jump into it too. Yeah, lots going on.
Oh my gosh, this has been a busy week, especially for sentencing and especially women. You know,
I know.
I'm like, my goodness, girls, stop
don't
all that.
FAFO with the women folk either, apparently.
Well, they need to quit FAFO with other folks because they in prison forever now.
That's exactly
a
right.
lot of them.
Excessive FAFO will put you behind bars.
Yes, it will, and they are behind bars. I got on my little peep-over glasses and my pearls.
All for Melody Ferris.
All for Melody Ferris. The lady that is the head of the Ferris wheel, as they call that family. It's kind of like As the World Turns.
It's a good description.
Right. So Melody Ferris was charged with shooting her husband and putting him on a burn pile to burn to death.
Yikes.
And so, I know, right? And they live out in this big sort of estate. Gary was a lawyer there in Atlanta, Georgia, or right around Atlanta. And they had 4 grown children. And we're going to do that story soon, but I keep mention it because these pearls, because every day Melody Ferris would walk in with her pearls, her peep-over glasses, and her monochromatic sweaters, and she would sit there stone-faced, just like a Blizzard Queen.
Wow.
You know, Blizzard Belinda sitting there. So she'd be sitting there and didn't say a word, and her kids are testifying against her. Anyway, it's a hot mess, and we're going to get into that later. But she didn't testify on her own behalf, but she got sentenced a few days ago, and she got sentenced to life in prison. She is 63 years old, and she got life in prison.
And even with her pearls, the stoicism was gone. The pearls were gone. The stoicism was gone. She cried and cried.
Oh, she did cry. The first time we saw emotion, then she turns around and looks right at her her next oldest son and tells him, I know who did this. Scott did this. And so if you thought that, why didn't you testify? But anyway, that's one we're working on. I've been working on that one for a while because it's crazy.
We have been following that one. Yeah, that's an interesting one. But there's a lot more. There's also an update on Suitcase Sarah.
Suitcase Sarah. She went in there, and Suitcase Sarah, she was offered a plea deal of 15 years. And James Owens went down there to her rescue like super lawyer.
Pensacola zone, case the zone.
Yeah, he went down there. And so she had gotten rid of 8 attorneys. It's been 4.5 years. She wanted to claim battered spouse syndrome or battered woman syndrome because she put her boyfriend in a suitcase, 20 by 28 by 8.
It was a drunken game of hide and seek.
Hide and seek. We were having a good day.
Sure, he could have unzipped himself anytime.
That's what she said.
That's why she recorded it with him asking for help.
Right.
Please let me out,
8
Sarah.
minutes in between the videos. Well, so she fooled around and found out too.
She sure did. She should have taken that plea deal.
She should have 15 years, but now she got life.
Well,
and in Florida, that
better
usually
for
means
everybody.
that. Right, definitely. Well, she's going to file an appeal, and I think James is going to help him with it. And just because this story's crazy, if I was him, I would jump out now because I think he wanted to have a book or a movie deal. This is like a dumb goes to court.
Right.
It's just like, why would you want to be their lawyer?
Murder for dummies.
Yeah. So anyway, we hope that's going on. But keep an eye out for Suitcase Sarah.
Okay.
Because she wants to appeal. Then Ashley Benefield, this is another one that we're working on.
That's the Black Swan?
That is right. That's the ballerina. When she was 24, she married Doug Benefield, who was 54.
Okay.
And then as life goes on and as the 30-year span happens between people and having a child and different kind of goals in life, things went awry. So we're working on that one too. I don't want to tell all about that, but she got sentenced too. She got 20 years plus 10 years probation, and she was claiming battered spouse. These folks are walking up to people, shooting them, burning them, shooting them, putting them in a suitcase, and then saying, they were battering me.
I know.
I think it's backwards.
I think you're right. It is. I mean, like we've talked about before in other cases, there are times when certainly people do crack. There is trauma, and maybe it's delayed reaction and something finally triggers them and they do something about it. But a lot of these ladies, and I use the word ladies loosely,
definitely,
are playing fast and loose with justice and their excuses for it. And then speaking of that, Lori Vallow Daybell, that's another monster.
Yeah, that's another cray-cray. I mean, she's Delulu.
Yeah.
I mean, she's jumping in there.
Wants to represent herself now.
Yeah, exactly. And she's already got 2 life sentences for killing her children and helping kill Chad Daybell's wife. So, I mean, it's just all a hot mess. We haven't even done those yet because it takes so much studying and research, and then they do extra dumb stuff.
Exactly. But we know a lot of our viewers and listeners also follow these cases. So we just want you to know we're following them too. And even those we haven't dived in, dived in.
Dip, dive, done.
Dip, dive, done. Yeah, we're playing too.
Like, whatever. Exactly. And then the other one is Jamie Komorowski. She is a young 20-something, and she was driving like 65 miles an hour in a 25 or 35 mile an hour zone in her Camry, and she hits a golf cart that has Samantha Miller and Eric Hutchinson, a couple that just got married a few minutes or hours ago.
She was still in her wedding dress.
She was, and she was a beautiful, sweet lady. It was just romantic. It was beautiful, but she hit them, and it killed Samantha, and it maimed and hurt Eric. And so, I mean, there you are, the happiest time of your life going to the worst time of your life.
Cut short.
Right. And but the extra grind here that people see, Jamie Komorowski is very spoiled, talking to her daddy on the telephone. She's like, Daddy, why does this stuff happen to me? And he answers back, because bad things happen to good people, honey. Not instead of, you just killed this bride on her wedding day, still in her wedding dress.
Because you were negligent.
Right, because you have a .261 blood alcohol level.
And we're speeding and hauling butt.
Right, and I understand daddies, taking care of their family and parents and stuff, but sometimes it got real there. And so he had kind of coddled her and talked to her. I mean, she's losing her mind in there.
Wow.
And he said, well, you're getting you the best lawyers, maybe 15 years. She got 25 years. So these ladies, and they wanted to throw the dice or whatever, I don't understand why. You don't got to kill somebody because you don't like them anymore. Right. You don't got to kill them because you want to divorce them or get a divorce instead of killing them.
Right. They don't want to give up the money. They don't want to give up the property, the whatever, the power, the influence, the reputation. It does come down to selfishness.
Right. And like this drinking and driving to me is about the dumbest thing ever right
I know.
now,
It's
especially.
so avoidable.
Yeah. Uber does not cost near as much as they just spent on this defense.
Right.
And plus, you didn't take someone's life. You should never probably get over that. So we've got all of that happening. Those are things we're studying up on. And you got Lori Vallow Daybell.
Yep. And then Jimmy J. Lee.
Jimmy J. Lee. He's a little Ole Miss student and he was majoring in social work. And so he went missing. This a couple of years ago. He went missing, and he had made arrangements to meet with someone, and I think have a date or what have you.
A rendezvous, if you will.
Perhaps.
Yes.
As they say in this court case, a hookup, which I don't like all of that, because what exactly does that mean? And really don't tell me.
Right.
But people don't deserve to die over it. And so this Ole Miss graduate is who he was going to see. And this case is so interesting because of the angle of everything, the LGBTQ, community, and people being awkward, talking about it, and then saying the craziest things to the people on the witness stand. And then this Jimmy J is what he likes to be called, J. Lee. And his mama knew that he was missing because he didn't call on her birthday. So he was a beautiful, sweet person, and they haven't found his body yet.
Oh, no.
So this is a total circumstantial case. And
Interesting.
And I believe that the graduate student did it. And
He might have met with some foul play.
Might have.
Interesting. And then we have this other one that I think we're following too, and then we're going to get to our main story here in a second. But Deputy Coroner Christopher Dontel killed apparently his mistress's baby daddy.
Again with that.
Yes. And then, but as so often happens with the love triangle, they're so hot and heavy at the beginning. And yet when someone dies and then someone gets accused, they suddenly find that the fingers are pointing at their prospective lovers as well. So I think he took a plea deal to go ahead and testify against the mistress.
Yeah. So don't think it's all that. That triangle ain't that sharp. And you know, I call it the freaky sneaky. The freaky sneaky will get you killed, in trouble, in prison, or whatever. Just do right. Come on.
I know. We were just talking about the nasty divorces too. And here's another guy that probably should have taken this route instead of murder. But James Craig is a dentist that's accused of poisoning his wife in a protein shake. And he used the same chemicals as we talked about in the eye drop murder. If you've not watched that episode, it's called Don't Blink, the eye drop murder, where someone poisoned basically the eye drops and killed this poor hairstylist. But this guy was just so arrogant. This is what he used to kill her, apparently, according to police. And then he also wanted to kill the detective that was looking into him.
Yeah.
Because that always is going to work. No one will ever look for the detective.
And another jailhouse person won't snitch on you.
No.
And here's just something through reading all these. When somebody typically doesn't get up off the couch, their Bubba six-pack, and they don't get up off the couch to get their own drink, when they're in that kitchen going, hey, Molly, what kind of protein shake you want? I'm going to make you one right here. Got some arsenic, cyanide, and tetrahydrolazine in it. And you're like, let me drink it. Don't. That's my advice on that one.
Good advice.
Thank you.
I agree. All right. Well, now we're getting into this case that we were talking about earlier. It's got some stand your ground qualities to it. And it's a real interesting case to me, I think, because I think a lot of people either know someone that have been in a situation like this, whatever town you live in, wherever you live anywhere in the world, from the Gulf Coast to, Maine or the Gulf of Yemen. I think people certainly understand that, couples are going to stray or they're going to wander, take some time apart, and, feelings get messy when you date other people. But then this couple, they got back together. This is in Massachusetts, a Massachusetts guy, Brian Camp, with his baby mama. They'd been together, had a couple of children together, took a break. Well, during that break, his girlfriend decided to date a coworker, and apparently wasn't too serious, at least not for her, but they dated for a little while, and then she ended it with him because she wanted to get back together with Brian. And according to Brian, he really didn't know much about this relationship that she had with this other guy, whatever that relationship was. Apparently, it wasn't important enough to her to share with Brian, or maybe she just didn't want to involve him, and it wasn't any of his business, so she didn't need to. But this 24-year-old Brian Camp had been charged for the death of Johnathan Letendre. He was 27. At the time, he was the coworker of the girlfriend. And basically, I think her name is Brooke Janik. And there's some interesting evidence in this case, too, the 911 call, because basically what had happened is that Letendre broke into their apartment. Camp said he didn't know anything was going on until his girlfriend started screaming, and he sees a man in the doorway, and then the man attacks him. And it goes on for 20 minutes, and she calls 911, and there's just a lot of interesting evidence in this case. But basically, why don't you pick it up from there?
Okay. All right. Well, Brooke and Brian have two children. Brooke was working at Dunkin' Donuts with Johnathan Letendre, Johnathan. Let's just call him Johnathan.
Okay.
He was the manager. Okay. So he just wasn't done being in love with her, I reckon.
He liked how she glazed the donuts.
I guess so. Or frappuccino, I don't know, but something like that. So anyway, Brian was upstairs in his room with Brooke. The kids are in their room. They had switched rooms. For some reason, the kids' room and the parents' room had switched about a week earlier. And this is important later because Johnathan decides, I'm going over to her house. I want to talk to her. So he comes in their house. They're all sleeping upstairs. He comes in their house, takes his shoes off, kicks them off to the side.
That's creepy.
Yep. Throws his jacket on the couch and kind of gets himself together, and he runs upstairs. And Brooke sees him because she had just told Brian, I hear something. And he's like, it's a cat. He's like sleepy.
Right.
Yeah. And Brian is sleeping totally naked. That's how he sleeps. Okay, so he's upstairs totally naked.
He was not ready for any fisticuffs.
No, he wasn't. So Brooke hears something. She jumps up and she sees it's Johnathan. Keep in mind that Brian doesn't even know this guy. He don't even know what he looks like. He don't even know what's going on.
Right.
But he knows his kids are in the room next door. His wife is screaming. He's naked. He jumps up a little bit, but Johnathan's bigger than Brian. Johnathan's about 6 foot tall and 190. And he came with a plan. So, when you know the plan and you got yourself geeked up, you already have an advantage.
Yes.
Somebody's laying there asleep, naked and afraid.
Right.
So he's laying there. Johnathan straddles and jumps on Brian and starts choking him. And he starts basically telling him, I'm going to kill you. Well, Brooke's screaming and carrying on. And so she runs out. This is a 20-minute grapple, fight, wrestle, go for the jugular.
Fighting for their lives.
Right. And so he's doing this. Johnathan's trying to eye gouge Brian with his fingers in his eyes, and he reaches around like that to do it. Then Brian grabs it's like a musket. They call it something else, but it's like a musket.
A shotgun of some sort.
Right, like this, and it's a long gun. So they're fighting over that, and that breaks in two. So Brian's holding one part of it, and Johnathan's holding the other. So they're beating each other to death with the parts of the gun, okay?
Golly.
They toss that. Then later, a shotgun gets involved. They're fighting so hard over that, and Brian's on his back, trying to choke him and put him down. So he doesn't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. Get Johnathan out of there.
Sure.
Because Jonathan's saying, I'm here to kill you, and so he's fighting for his life. And so they get to doing that, and he's still naked, and he's still fighting for his life. And Brooke had to run down and outside. She's calling 911. Well, Johnathan and him keep going. The shotgun breaks. They're hitting each other with that, too. So the fight goes downstairs. And so in the time being, Brooke is calling 911. And we think, okay, they'll be here soon, And so they roll down the stairs.
And this is right after Christmas of 2022. So everybody's probably, post-holiday, chilled. He had no idea there was this potentially jealous ex-lover in the picture.
He didn't know. He didn't even know his name.
Right.
And so also they had just swapped bedrooms. Johnathan came right up to that bedroom. So I don't know how he knew, or maybe he looked, or maybe he got lucky. But what if the kids would have been in there?
That's terrifying.
Because he came in there with the plan. And so they're fighting, and finally Brian gets to, hit him and get him down. And at some point he gets a handgun and he shoots Johnathan. It goes in his ribs, his stomach, his colon, and it does damage there. So they're grappling around.
And that's the call that's heard on 911, or the shot that I should say that's heard on the 911
the first shot.
call. Yes.
And so Brooke is outside, and 911 is asking questions. She's told them who all the players are. And they think, gosh, they'll be here any minute. And Brooke is out there with no shoes on. Brian's in here naked. Johnathan's got shot, but he's laying down and he's still coming up, like almost like a monster. He's pushing himself off the floor. So Brian's watching for him, and he keeps saying, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. So he's watching him over there. And Brooke said the 911 people are asking, is Johnathan okay? Send him back in there to look. He's not going back in there to look. He goes upstairs, he being Brian, goes upstairs to put on some clothes. And in the time being, he calls his boss, which I think that's pretty smart. If you don't know what to do. I've called my boss before when I've been in a situation that I've just been plumb scared about. And so the boss goes, take some pictures, get your clothes on, take some pictures and get out of there. But he's like, my kids are upstairs, so I'm not exactly doing that. So he's staying there in the house kind of back. And so 8 minutes go, the police aren't there, 911's not there. Brian's hand is kind of broken or fractured. His face is bloody.
Yes.
He can hardly see. He's pummeled to death, but he doesn't really feel it. So with Johnathan trying to push up, he just keeps doing all that. So he shoots him again in the head this time.
He won't be moving after that.
No, he shoots him in the head.
About 8.5 minutes after the first shot.
Right. And see, that is the issue with the courts. They're like, that first shot was fine. And this is in Massachusetts. Now, if this would have been in Florida we wouldn't even, this wouldn't even be a case.
Oh, absolutely not. They would never have charged.
And that's what they kept saying, all through and people in Massachusetts are like, why are we here? They said, because there was 8.5 minutes between those shots. And they said, Brian could have done anything. Brian could have ran. He could have got in the car. He could have got his kids out. He could have done this or that or put something on him. Well, Johnathan Letendre could have stayed the hell out of his house.
That's exactly right.
He
didn't have to break in. He didn't have to come at him. He didn't have to repeat, I'm going to kill you over and over again. He also could have stayed on the ground the first time he got shot.
But see, he wanted that woman, and he's telling him, I'm going to kill you. And he goes, before Jonathan's dead, he goes, I'm going to need a lawyer because I'm going to kill you.
That's insane. That guy's got some mental problems it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. And Brian is such a good old boy. He's a sweet guy. But here's where the lawyers go crazy. He went in police custody, and they ask questions. And sometimes, even when you're telling the truth, the way you tell it, it comes back to bite you. Like one of his passing statements was, if I did that to someone, I hope someone would put me down. So that turned into the prosecutor going, oh, so you put him down, instead of he was in your house.
Right.
Because, this is the prosecution. This is the state of Massachusetts going against Brian. He's the defendant. This is a 24-year-old guy sitting there, could be looking at a lot of prison time.
Yeah, it's interesting that they chose to pursue a charge against him for this.
Yeah, a lot of people said that was ridiculous and that the long time it took for the police to get there was a factor. His children were upstairs was a factor. The fact that he was hurt and he was threatening him. So,
and he'd come at him and attacked him for 20 minutes.
Oh,
he's
fighting hard.
He's bruised. It's the middle of the night. There's absolutely, to me, no reason.
Oh, no.
I don't understand why they would even. Yeah, it is unsettling. I guess you might think, well, 8.5 minutes later. But I mean, he doesn't know anything more after 8.5 minutes than he did the previous, and he's a lot worse for wear after those 8.5 minutes.
Right.
So, yeah.
And Brooke's not necessarily telling him at the time. And I'm like, she's probably just too busy. She's standing out there without her shoes. So this is how valiant and sweet and good this guy is in my mind. He goes upstairs to get his clothes. He brings some shoes down to Brooke. Because that was nice. It's Christmas time in Massachusetts.
Cold.
So you see how he loves her.
Well, and also the evidence that they found in the scene, like they found that Johnathan had brought a jacket in, like you said, and he tossed it to the side, and they found a pocket knife.
Yep, a little knife. He just had a knife in his jacket.
They had a knife in his jacket, and they also, the medical examiner testified that they found handcuffs in his pocket as well during the autopsy. So that is not indicative of somebody. It sounds to me like he meant his threats. Like he did intend to kill this man. In his mind, that was the only roadblock standing between him and eternal romance with Brooke, apparently.
Yeah. Oh, well, and it's so crazy to me. Here's a little couple with their children at Christmas time.
Minding their own business.
Right. They just made spaghetti and meatballs. Mama made that for them. And they cleaned up the house, picked up the house a little bit, put the toys and stuff up after Christmas. The kids had been bathed. They're in bed. They're upstairs nesting in their room, trying to go to sleep. And here he comes. And we're sitting in court in Massachusetts because I should have shot him twice in the beginning instead of waiting a minute like that. So that's what they were saying. This one was fine. This other was manslaughter, the 8.5 later. So the jury starts deliberating, and I thought, oh my gosh, because it could have gone either way, because here we are in court. And you have to keep in mind too, this was like an MMA fight, and he's still sleepy and naked. I keep saying that.
Hats off, Brian. Or clothes off, I should say. Right. Hats and clothes off. That's pretty impressive that he managed to defend himself and his whole family in the buff.
I know, because how much more vulnerable would you be? Your children are next door. You're naked. You were asleep. You're fat, dumb, and happy.
He was
and you're
naked and unafraid.
That's right. He was naked and unafraid, yeah. So what they thought about was saying, well, you know what? This might end up a case with a situation called jury nullification, where the jury sends a message that way. And some people think that's what happened in OJ's trial, and some people don't. So, I mean, like, it is our system, and we have to respect what the jury decides, no matter what. Well, they kind of went in there and deliberated for a couple of hours, and they came back, and it was really scary thinking about that.
Yeah.
So he was standing there, and they came back, and they found him not guilty.
Oh, wow. I imagine the wave of relief he must have felt.
Oh, he looked like he just did a big sigh. And you know, people people were saying, how can he be so calm? I'm like, because it's all done now. I mean, this is the kind of person he is. But the moral of this story is, stay out of people's houses, number one.
Yes.
Because if you come in someone's house in Florida, I'm pretty sure you're not going to walk out.
No, and I'm just thankful that, and I hate it for Jonathan's family and friends and loved ones, but it doesn't seem to me like he was in his right mind, for one, doing something like that. But second, if somebody had to go out on a stretcher, better it be the person who was the aggressor than the family that was just trying to live their life.
Right. Because this is a combination of stand your ground, castle doctrine, and what is morally right. You just don't come in and threaten to kill people.
That's right. And Brian Camp knew that. And I'm glad that worked out for him. But you're right. In Florida, they're not going to put up with that. There wouldn't have even been any question about it. There would have been, he could have come back and shot him 8 more times every 8.5 minutes. And Florida would be like, well.
Shouldn't have been in his house, Right. And then because they were saying, this duty to retreat, you're asleep. And so you got to wake up and think about every legal whichever way it could go because somebody else, get out of folks' house.
Right.
Don't come in my house.
It's his duty not to attack, right?
Don't come in my house. Don't come in your house. Don't come in James's house because you will want to get out.
Well, this is one of those cases where you feel like the good guy came out at the end. Although it is, again, tragic. I hate it for Jonathan's family and friends. I know they're missing him. It's awful when someone dies.
It is. It's horrible.
And people can debate whether or not he should have walked away or not. But at least that family knows, Brian Camp's family knows, they can count on that daddy to protect them.
No doubt.
Awesome. Well, Pam, thank you again for bringing us this story and for updating us on all the other cases as well.
You're welcome.
And we thank you for joining us. That is it for this episode. Boyfriend shot girlfriend's jealous ex-boyfriend. Don't FAFO with Brian Camp. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. And remember, you can listen more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And you can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.